Hello, good morning and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to another session of the Hindu News Analysis dated 31st of August 2024. Now, before I start the discussion, I just want to ask you a couple of questions regarding the concept of GDP. Every day in the newspaper, assuming you read the newspaper or you watch the Hindu news analysis, there is at least once that the term GDP is mentioned. And I am being very liberal when I say, or I am being very conservative when I say at least once. So, the term GDP is mentioned on day-to-day basis, day in, day out, in the words of the finance minister, in the words of the experts, in the newspaper, in the news channels, etc. So, my question to you is, who is the person who coined the concept of GDP, gross domestic product? And much more importantly, since the GDP concept is so important, which is used so frequently, did the person who framed the concept of GDP, did the person win the Nobel Prize? If you do not know the answer, I will let you know the answer to these two questions in the course of the discussion today. Please wait for it. Now, let me show you the articles that I will be taking up for today's discussion. I have chosen 10 articles from international edition of the Hindu newspaper. These are, the first two articles are related to the gross domestic product growth data that has been published for the first quarter. We will have a detailed discussion on this. After this, editorial, the game plan that India should follow to host 2036 Olympics. The fourth article regarding Vadhvan Port. Now, if you search in the Hindu newspaper today, there is no specific article with the title of Vadhvan Port. In fact, there is one article where the Prime Minister is seeking forgiveness regarding the fall, or let us say the destruction of let us say Shivaji's right, let us say Murti. But in that particular article, there is a mention of one term, Vadhvan Port. Let us have a detailed discussion regarding Vadhvan Port, not on the statue of Shivaji Maharaj. Fifth article, Samagra Shiksha funds. There is a dispute or the friction between the central government as well as the state government of Tamil Nadu. Let us understand this. The Supreme Court of India has agreed to set up a 5-judge bench to hear Kerala's plea. Seventh article, the Supreme Court in Brazil. Yesterday we discussed regarding Telegram, the debate between the duties of the app owner or the app developer versus the free speech. Again, there is one more article today. Brazilian Supreme Court has ordered freezing of Starlink assets. Eighth article, scientists are hired through lateral entry in one of the scientific organizations in India. That will lead to certain discussion now. Fertilizers are source of many ailments, statement given by the Minister for Cooperation. And finally, the 10th article, LGBTQIA plus couple can open joint bank accounts, the order which has been issued by the central government. So, these are the 10 articles that I will be taking up today for detailed discussion. Now, yesterday when I did the discussion, 2 points regarding that. The first point is, there was one student who put a comment, sir, which are the articles relevant for the mains examination, which are relevant for prelims examination? I am not able to understand. Please clarify it. My dear, I generally do not provide that kind of a classification for a simple reason. Whether the point is relevant for prelims or mains, it should not matter to you. Reason being, if you strictly go for bifurcation, that I will read only this for prelims, only this for mains, then I think there might be certain issues going forward when you want to write answers for the mains examination. But anyways, out of these articles, if you want to find out which are relevant for prelims and mains, I would simply say the first 4 articles are relevant for the mains examination. The next 6 articles are more relevant for prelims, but having said so, again I would not rule out concept of a Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan to be asked in the mains examination, right? And for that matter, even the Kerala issue, it doesn't mean it will not be asked in the mains examination. But anyways, that is point number 1. Point number 2, there was one student who pointed out that in first article that I discussed yesterday, sir, you mentioned Manrega to be part of, right, let's say part C scheme under gender budgeting, but the article simply says it is a part of the part B scheme. You are absolutely right. It was a mistake on my part. Let me correct it. Part A, part B and part C. The part C scheme which has been announced or basically classified by the government for the first time is basically PM Kisan, and part B, Manrega, belongs to part B scheme. Okay, so this is according to the expenditure profile which has been provided by the Government of India, Finance Ministry for the financial year 24 and 25. Now, before I start the discussion for today's articles, I just want to make one simple announcement, and the most important announcement for many civil service aspirants. If you find out what are the most important features or let's say distinguishing characteristics of the UPSC toppers, you will see that they do not compromise on the syllabus coverage. They cover all the relevant material, cover all the relevant topics. Second, they undertake lot of practice for preliminary examination as well as mains examination. Now, in regards to these characteristics, if you want to take care of these things, we have an offer for you. Unacademy's offer at 24,999 or 24,999 rupees, under which we will offer mentorship assistance to you. You will also get a flat 50%. After that, the price has been dropped to this one. You will also be getting extension of up to 6 months. You will be given the material to read, and you will also be given lot of test papers for practicing for both preliminary examination as well as a mains examination. If you are interested, the offer ends tonight. Please do check out the details in the description below. Now, let me start the discussion. The first two articles, first from the editorial and the second article from the headlines today. The GDP growth rate for the first quarter has come down to 6.7% or has fallen to 6.7%, which is the lowest in the last 5 quarters. If you just compare the GDP growth rate of the last 5-year quarters, you will see that for March 2023 it was 6.2, June 2023 it is 8.2, then 8.1, 8.6, 7.8, and right after experiencing good growth rates, that is above 7%, now for the first quarter June 2024, the GDP growth rate has come down to 6.7%. Point number 1, should you memorize all of these GDP growth rates quarter wise? Please do not waste your time, because by the time you write the exams next year, the GDP growth rates quarter wise would be different. Please do not memorize them. But if you ask me, sir, should I memorize, let's say, annual growth rates for the last couple of years, I would strongly advise in favor of it. In case you want to write a mains answer, you might need the GDP growth rates for the last couple of years. Now, what is the importance of this article? What should you take away? Inferences should be what? These are the important points. Point number 1, the consumption expenditure that is generally represented in the form of PFCE, private final consumption expenditure, has improved. If you look at the graphical representation that I have provided on the right side, please make an observation. There is a GFCE that represents a government final consumption expenditure, PFCE, private final consumption expenditure, and there is a GFCF, that is a gross fixed capital formation. And if you are wondering, sir, what is the importance of each of these terminology? This represents, that is a GFCE represents how much is the consumption expenditure done by Government of India, expenditure done by the government in simple terms. The PFCE represents how much is the expenditure done by all of us to purchase goods and services. And the GFCF represents how much investment has been done by the private sector companies. That is the most important indicator, which is a component of GFCF, gross fixed capital formation. And please remember this, in the last couple of financial years, there is some concern which has been raised regarding the GDP growth rate in case of India. No doubt the GDP, that is the market price of all the final goods and services, it has kept on expanding in the last couple of years, of course, except the pandemic years. But the problem is, there is a concern that the GDP growth rate is being observed because of government expenditure. I hope you understand this. Because of government expenditure. That is essentially when you measure GDP, the GDP can keep on increasing because of expenditure done by all of us in terms of purchasing goods and services. It can also increase because of the companies, that is the firm's expenditure. It can also increase because of government expenditure. Of course, I am talking about the GDP measurement using expenditure method. So, the concern which has been raised in recent years, one of the concerns regarding the GDP is that the rise in the GDP is mainly accounted because of government expenditure. Because the government is spending more and more money, the GDP is increasing. And the problem related to that is, you cannot keep on sustaining such a high expenditure by the government for a longer duration. Maybe when there is a pandemic, when there is a slowdown, when there is a recession, the governments will follow a counter-cyclical policy, that is basically increase expenditures so that there is a revival, there is a recovery in the economy. But after that, it has to be done, that is the GDP growth rate has to be achieved with higher expenditure by the households. That is essentially there should be higher and higher demand for goods and services in the market. And if you just make an observation here, you will realize that the government expenditure has contracted. The GFCE has actually contracted for the first quarter. And what is the reason for this? The reason behind this is very simple. There were elections conducted, Lok Sabha elections conducted very recently. And during the phase of elections, generally because of restrictions imposed, the expenditure announced by the government is lower. And that is the reason you will see that for the first quarter in the current financial year, there is a contraction which has been experienced by the government. On one side, you can simply say it is good. It is good because now it shows that there is a higher demand for the goods and services from the households. That is, the consumption demand is higher, which is good for the economy. It is also a cause of concern. Cause of concern in the sense, the government will have to keep on spending certain amount of money in the current financial year. But because of the elections, it has controlled its expenditure, let us say in the form of capital expenditure. Does it not mean now there is a higher pressure on the government of India to spend more money, on infrastructure development, on other expenditures to ensure that they will be able to meet a certain amount of expenditure in the remaining months of current financial year. That is a point to note, please remember that. Point number 2, why do we say that it is always better to have higher private final consumption expenditure? Reason behind this is, whenever the private final consumption expenditure is higher, it simply means the demand for the goods and services is higher. And when the demand for the goods and services is higher, obviously you will see that the private sector investment, the private sector investments will also be higher. Reason is simple, as a private sector, they will always keep a track on demand. If the demand is higher, they will invest more money. If they invest more money, employment generation will happen, correct? There will be employment generation. Higher employment generation essentially means, again, more salaries or wages earned by the households. When there is more salaries or wages earned by the households, the demand for the goods and services increases. Higher demand means higher production. And higher production essentially means higher employment generation all over again. So, you will be able to see that there is a cyclical effect of this. It is basically going to lead to a virtuous cycle in the Indian economy. And ultimately all of this is preferential because the GDP increases, demand is there is employment generation, and more importantly all of this can also lead to better consumption in the rural market as well. And this is one more very important point, please remember this. According to the chief economic advisor, he in the interview stated yesterday that there is a recovery in the rural consumption, and this was also one of the point of concern in recent times. GDP is increasing, but what about rural consumption? And that was a context when there was a discussion that India might be experiencing a K-shaped recovery. Certain parts of the economy are performing very well, but look at the rural market, look at the rural demand, it is not experiencing good growth rate. But the chief economic advisor says there is an improvement in the rural demand now, consumption is increasing. And how do you understand? Many of you will read the newspaper and ultimately have this kind of question, sir, how do I understand that there is an improvement in the rural consumption demand? Just look at what is happening to the demand of the tractors. Look at what is happening to the demand for two-wheelers. You will realize that lot of these are consumed in the rural market, and if there is a improved demand for this, ultimately it means there is a better consumption that is happening in the rural market as well. So, second very important point to make a note of or inference that you need to derive out of this is rural consumption has also revived. It is going to improve in the coming days, that will further contribute to higher growth in the Indian economy. Third very important point, the government expenditure because of the elections has been affected, and that is very clearly visible when you look at these kind of parameters such as the gross the government final consumption expenditure. So, these are certain positive takeaways that you can make from the newspaper articles. But having said so, there are certain concerning areas as well. What are the concerning areas? The first one, agriculture sector. The first very important area is of cause of concern is agriculture sector. The GDP growth rate or the GVA, gross value addition in the agriculture sector has actually come down. It has actually or it has grown, but at a lesser rate now. That is a cause of concern. And many experts attribute this, many of the experts are attributing this to the variation in the rainfall in the recent season. But having said so, in the coming days as well, there is a furthermore cause of a concern, because right now we are experiencing the season of monsoon, and in this particular season of monsoon, there is a variation or in the variation in the rainfall as well as the spatial distribution of the rainfall, and this is expected to have an impact on the further cultivation in the coming seasons or the coming cycles in the agriculture sector. And more importantly, agriculture sector has a very close connection to inflation rates in India as well. Very recently, the food inflation rates in India have remained higher, have remained elevated. RBI governor also says it has remained very sticky. Reforms are being taken or undertaken, but the food inflation has remained at an elevated level. So, that is also cause of concern. Now, what will happen to inflation rate in the coming days? Because please understand this, if the inflation rate remains elevated, then RBI might have to further prolong the current situation in the monetary policy. That is essentially the repo rate has been kept at the same level for many months now. Reason cited by RBI is essentially the inflation rate. So, if the inflation rate does not go down, then it basically will force RBI to maintain the same level of the repo rate under the monetary policy commission or monetary policy review. And as such, if you are reading about this, you will also realize that on the other side, the USA market has suffered because of higher or let us say the stability in the federal funds rate which has been maintained by the Federal Reserve. And as a result of this, there are concerns by the way, that USA, even though they are willing to reduce the federal funds rate now in the month of September, Some of the experts are saying it might be too late now. There might be, again underline the term, there might be let's say a slowdown followed by a recession in the USA market. Again, there are certain indicators for recession. There are other indicators which basically say there will not be any recession in the USA as well. But the Federal Reserve has already stated that it is the time now, it is the right time to reduce interest rates to promote growth in the economy. So what will RBI do now? What will RBI do? If inflation rate remains elevated, they will be forced to maintain the same repo rate. But the problem is, if they maintain the same repo rate, it can even shave off, it can even limit the GDP in the coming year. And this concern was already raised in the recently concluded Monetary Policy Review Committee, where the members of the review committee have stated that if we keep the repo rate at the same level, the GDP growth rate can be contained by 1%, which is a cause of concern for us. And because I am discussing about inflation, I just want to add one more point here. Very interesting fact which was reported in yesterday's newspaper, such as Indian Express, Financial Express, etc. What is this fact? Listen to me carefully now. Traditionally in case of India, it is generally the rainfall which is having a larger impact on food inflation. It has been the rainfall which has had a larger impact on food inflation. And whenever there is a season of rainfall, RBI will be mindful about it, and accordingly RBI generally changes the interest rates to contain or to promote contain inflation or to promote growth in the economy. But according to a research which has been conducted by HSBC, now the research says that it is the temperature in India, and not the rainfall which will have a higher impact on food inflation. I will repeat this. It is temperature in India which has a larger influence on food inflation, not the rainfall. And what is the impact of this? Some of you might simply think, sir, what is the point? What is the impact of all of this? My dear, if the temperature is the most important determining factor of food inflation, RBI has to recalibrate its approach. RBI has to change its approach now. Why? Rather than rainfall having an impact on food inflation, temperature will have an impact on production and food inflation. Don't you think if the temperature keeps on rising, temperatures will keep on changing, RBI also has to consider that particular factor to basically change its monetary policy approach. So that is one more interesting fact I just wanted to share with you people regarding the inflation issue. And the third factor which is a cause of concern, which has been raised by the chief economic advisor, is the global disruptions. In the last couple of months, again it has continued for a very long duration now. For the last couple of months, certain events that are taking place in the Middle Eastern let's say countries, in the European countries, etc., has actually led to disruptions in the supply chain, has led to disruptions in, let's say, the access to raw material, disruptions leading to higher market prices of some of the raw materials, etc. If these disruptions will continue, then it might have a limiting impact on the GDP growth rates in the coming days or in the coming months for Indian economy. So these are certain important points regarding the GDP growth related article which has been given in the headlines as well as in the editorial page of Hindu newspaper. Done? Now, associated with this, I will solve a PYQ question and then I will give you assignment. There was a question which was asked in the prelims examination in the year 2017, again related to concept of gross domestic product. Which of the following has or have occurred in India after its liberalization of economic policies in 1991? Share of agriculture in GDP has increased enormously. Generally, the term enormously is a red flag. It is a concern. Why? Generally, you will not experience anything increasing or decreasing enormously in the economy, and underline the term generally, not always. So, share of agriculture in GDP has increased enormously post 1991, obviously no, it has not increased enormously, right? In fact, in the past, if you see, the contribution of agriculture to GDP was much higher. In terms of percentage, it was much higher. Now, it has actually come down. It is somewhere around 16 to 17%. So, first statement is wrong. Share of India's exports in the world trade have increased, simply increased. Yes, as a percentage, India's trade out of the total trade, that is India's exports out of the total trade in the international market, has it increased post 1991? Yes. FDI inflows have increased, definitely yes. The point number 3 is not a brainer at all. It is not at all difficult. Why? 1991 reforms actually led to opening up of the economy, and when you open up the economy, automatically what will happen to, let's say, the concept of foreign investments in India? It will increase. And finally, the fourth point, which I felt was a tricky statement, but if you have read the above, if you read the impact of 1991, it is not at all difficult. India's foreign exchange reserves increased enormously. Some of you will basically use the term enormously and say, no, it is wrong. No, my dear, it is actually right. The statement is actually right. Post 1991, India's forex reserves have suddenly, or let's say, have improved in a huge number. Currently, India houses more than $600 billion worth of forex reserves, and it has been possible in a span of hardly around 2.5 decades or 3 decades, thanks to the reforms which have been implemented post 1991 in case of India. And just to make the point much more clear to you, please observe the graph that I have given, and for you it will be visible above my head. Please have a look at the graph. You will see that post 1991, the amount of forex reserves which are held in case of India, or which are part of Reserve Bank of India's duty to be held, you will see that the forex reserves have increased by a large margin. So, fourth statement is correct, 2, 3, 4 are correct, right option will be option B, right, that is the right option. Now, assignment to you. First assignment today, MCQ assignment number 18, look at the statements. First one, first statement, India's GDP is larger when measured under nominal exchange rate compared to PPP exchange rate. Second, India is the third largest when measured in PPP exchange rate and fifth largest when measured in nominal exchange. Third one, China has the largest GDP when measured under PPP exchange rate. So, these are the 3 statements. This is the first assignment for you people in today's let's say discussion. What is the right option? How many of the above statements are true? Let me know the answer in the comment section, and if you do not know, wait for my next session. I will have a discussion on this. Now, this is MCQ assignment. What about descriptive question assignment? Mains answer writing assignment number 14. GDP growth should be means to achieve inclusive growth and not be an end goal in itself. I will repeat the statement here. GDP growth should be a means to achieve inclusive growth and not be an end goal in itself. Elaborate the statement, 10 marks, 150 words. Now, some of you will say, sir, how do I frame the answer? What are the points I should write? I will help you out. Please go through this article. A very nice article which appeared in Financial Express a certain time period back. If you read the article, again, I hope you understand this. Is it the only article which will give you information regarding how to write this answer? Absolutely no. Multiple articles are there. But one article that has very good information which will help you to write answer to this question is this article, Read Beyond GDP, Go Beyond GDP. Please go through this article, and I keep on getting mails asking me, sir, you share articles in the news analysis, from where will I be able to download these articles? My dear, all you need to do is join our Telegram channel. The PPT that I am using will be uploaded in the Telegram channel. Do join there and download, read, and much more importantly, practice answer writing. Okay. Now, what about yesterday's assignment? MCQ assignment number 16. Consider the following regarding the gender budgeting. The gender budgeting is provided for as per the provisions under the Constitution of India? No. The Constitution of India does not have any provisions for gender budgeting. Forget about gender budgeting. The term budget itself is not mentioned in the Constitution. Rather, we have the term annual financial statement. Second statement, the gender responsive budgeting was introduced in 2005 and 6 in India. Yes, the gender responsive budgeting is limited to central government and no states in India so far have adopted this practice. It is wrong. More than 20 states, example Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Kerala, etc. have already adopted this practice of gender responsive budgeting. So, only one statement is true, right option will be option A. Second assignment, number 17, consider the following statements regarding Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. It will provide at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment for adults in every household in rural India for a calendar year. Statement is wrong. The right statement is it will provide at least 100 days for adults in every household in a financial year. So, first statement is wrong. MGNREGS is a centrally sponsored scheme. Yes, MGNREGS is covered under direct benefit transfer. Under DBT, we have more than 300 schemes now. Remember this. Under direct benefit transfer, we have more than 300 schemes. The schemes where cash subsidies are provided and also the schemes where the kind subsidies are provided. More than 300 schemes. One of them is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Third statement is true. Right option will be option B. Only two of the statements are correct. Let me go to the second article. A game plan for India's success as a 2036 Olympic host. Now, very recently, the Prime Minister stated that India is preparing to bid for hosting 2036 Olympics. And in the last couple of months, there has been a lot of discussion with the Paris Olympics happening. There has been a discussion whether should India also host a Olympics event. But much more importantly, the discussion should be, should India host the Olympics? I hope you understand this. Should India host the Olympics looking at the current situation? Because please understand, there are many arguments in favor of countries hosting Olympic Games, and at the same point of time, there are also multiple arguments against holding such an event. What are the arguments and what has been provided in the article? Let me give you the important points. Point number 1, until very recently, the process of identifying and selecting a country to host Olympics was actually different. Selection of a host country was different. Essentially, the process involved a country submitting interest, that is a letter of interest to the International Olympics Committee, IOC. A letter of interest will be submitted to International Olympics Committee, and then there is a particular process where they will send the representatives. IOC representatives will go to each of these countries who want to host Olympics. They will conduct investigations, etc. And finally, the committee will vote and identify or select the country which will be hosting Olympics. Right? This was the process. But because there was a huge criticism in many countries regarding the selection of the countries, and more importantly, regarding the criticism of within the domestic market of the people regarding the participation in the Olympics, the process of selecting the countries has been changed post 2019 now. After 2019, now the selection procedure basically focuses on 3 parameters. They will focus on 3 very important parameters. What are the 3 parameters? First one, flexibility. The first parameter of focus is flexibility. The second parameter is sustainability. And the third parameter that they focus is the cost effectiveness. Cost effectiveness. Now, what is the importance of these 3 parameters? Understand the history here. The history is, whenever the countries are chosen to conduct or let us say hold the Olympic Games, generally these Olympic Games were supposed to be conducted in one city, and because it is supposed to be conducted in one city, the amount of infrastructure that is required will be very, very high, And when you need very high infrastructure, the country or the, right, let's say the state or let's say the city which has to develop this infrastructure, they will incur very high amount of money. They will incur very high amount of expenditure in simple terms. But much more importantly, they will spend money after the games are over. After the Olympic games are over, many of these infrastructures are useless. Either they are completely useless or they are used but very less. That is, either they are not at all used after the games are over, the infrastructure remains locked, or in certain cases the infrastructure is used but the usage of this infrastructure is very less. So, there was a large criticism against this kind of a practice during the holding of Olympic Games, and that is a precise reason from 2019, which was used, right, which was announced in 2019 but started being used in 2021, the three parameters which are focused were on flexibility, sustainability and cost effectiveness, which essentially means now under the new rules of selecting the countries to host Olympic Games, you need not have the games being conducted only in one city. You can spread these Olympic Games, right, according to the requirement amongst different states or different countries if required, or even different cities. You can basically, right, hold the games spread out like this in multiple cities, so that the pressure of developing infrastructure, maintaining infrastructure will not fall only on one city. And not just this, under the new methodology, the countries were also encouraged to use existing infrastructure, not required to develop all the infrastructure newly for conducting the games. Use the existing infrastructure, so that even after the games are over, you will be able to continue to use the existing infrastructure. Essentially, it means expenditures can be controlled because of this. So, these kind of parameters have been implemented, and following this, Government of India has shown interest, very recently it has shown interest that they want to conduct Olympics in the year 2036. They want to host the Olympic Games in 2036. So, what are the arguments in favor of Government of India holding these Olympic Games, and what are the arguments against Government of India organizing the Olympic Games in India? Let us do the critical evaluation. This is more important, critical evaluation. Point number 1, generally any country that will host Olympic Games will attract a large number of tourists. It will be able to attract a large number of tourists, and when the tourist will enter into a country, it essentially means they will bring in large amount of dollars as well. So, inflow of the forex reserves or the foreign currencies, it will increase a lot. Point number 2, which is also equally important, when you host Olympic Games, when tourists will come into India, don't you think the consumption of services will start increasing? Hotel services, food services, travel services, etc. So, the consumption or the demand for the goods and services will start increasing. G and S, the demand for the goods and services will automatically increase, that is good for the economy. Point number 3, you will have to construct, let us say, infrastructure. You will have to provide lot of goods and services for the athletes, etc. So, when you need all of this, the demand for suppliers, the demand for raw materials will also start increasing, which is also a good thing, especially considering India houses a very large number of micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs. So, the production from MSMEs, supply through MSMEs or even the other companies in the domestic market will increase, and that is good because MSMEs are suffering because of the pandemic. Fourth very important point, what will happen to the branding and image of India in the global market? What will happen to the branding and image of India in the global market? There will be a huge bump in the image or branding of India. That is, let us say you can use the branding of invest in India, or right, let us say tourism in India or Bharat, etc. You can use these kind of brandings. So, the branding of India as a destination of tourism, a destination of investment, etc., will also start increasing. So these are some of the arguments in favor of holding Olympic Games in India in the year 2036. But at the same point of time, there are also a lot of points against hosting Olympic Games. What is the against points, or what are the points against holding these Olympic Games? First one, the cost itself is very, very high. The cost, that is the amount of expenditure that you will incur, will be very, very high. And according to various surveys and researches that have been conducted regarding the past Olympic Games, whenever the Olympic Games are announced to be held in one particular country, initially whatever expenditure they estimate, by the time the games are over, the expenditure will be much, much higher than that. The expenditure will be much, much higher than whatever has been estimated. For example, in many of these Olympics, the amount of expenditure incurred have been more than 100% of the original estimate. There will be time overruns, the cost overruns, the cost of input will keep on increasing. So the amount of expenditure will be very, very high. Point number one. Point number two, whenever such expenditures are incurred through government agencies, there is always a potential of corruption. Correct? There is always a potential of corruption. I am saying potential of corruption, because the amount of expenditure will be so high, there might be certain elements who will use this particular situation. Because of a lack of transparency, there can be corruption in the system. That is the second point. And has it happened in the past? Of course, yes, it has happened in the past. Point number three, against holding Olympics in India. If you want to develop so much of infrastructure to conduct Olympics, hold Olympics, it means you will have money. Government might simply say, I don't have money, but I will borrow from the market. Then the question will be, if you borrow from the market, don't you think your debt will increase? Your debt will keep on increasing. And when the debt increases, even to service the debt, that is basically repayment along with the interest, etc., the burden will be very high. As such, currently, if you look at the budgetary documents, you will realize that around 20% of the total expenditure incurred, I am rounding off the number by the way, around 20% of the total expenditure incurred in an annual budget by the government is in the form of interest payment. So now to develop this infrastructure, you will borrow money, and when you borrow money, you will have to spend money, a lot of money, and repay that over a period of time. What about your interest liabilities? What about your debt? What will happen because you are spending more money on Olympics about expenditure on welfare then? Don't you think you can use the same amount of money to provide welfare to the people? So I hope you understand there will be counter arguments for conducting these kind of events. Right. Next, fourth important point. Is it the right way to develop infrastructure which may not be used after the games are over? For example, many of the infrastructures that were developed during Commonwealth Games, which were conducted in India by the way, during multiple games events, we have developed infrastructure, but either the quality of infrastructure has been found to be inferior, quality has been a cause of concern, or after the games are over, the usage of the infrastructure has led to certain concerns. Right. So these are certain points in favor of India hosting Olympic Games in 2036 and against India hosting Olympic Games in 2036. What is the way forward then? What should we do? The argument here is, if Government of India decides to hold or conduct or host the games in 2036, certain points can be recommended here. What are the important points? First one, there is a corporate social responsibility. Right now, there is CSR, corporate social responsibility, under which many of the companies are using certain amount of their profits to provide assistance under CSR. Why don't we use these particular funds for training of our athletes so that our podium finishes, that is basically the tally, medal tally will be much higher when we are hosting the games in 2036. And can we use the CSR funds also to develop certain types of infrastructure under the Olympics 2036. But for that, we need to make changes under the CSR law or under the Companies Act of 2013. Point number 1. Point number 2, if you want to host the Olympic Games in 2036, there are certain cities which already have certain infrastructure. For example, in Tamil Nadu, there is very good infrastructure which is already there. In Delhi also, there is sufficient amount of infrastructure, there is already there to host certain types of games. Government of India, rather than developing infrastructure somewhere else, should target these kinds of cities where infrastructure is already present. Point number 3, regarding let us say the expenditures. One way to ensure that you will earn certain amount of revenue, better revenues than many of the countries which have conducted or hosted Olympics, is by leveraging the sports which are very famous in India. Leverage the sports which are very famous in India. For example, all of you will agree, cricket is very famous in India, and I hope you know cricket is being considered, cricket has been a part of Olympics, has been considered, not will be considered, has been considered as a part of Olympic Games now. 2028, you will see cricket also in the Olympics. Why not leverage this? Why not use this opportunity? Because in case of India, cricket is very famous. Why not conduct cricket matches in such a way that you will be able to generate lot of revenues? At least this can reduce the expenditure pressure on the government of India. So, leverage the sports where we have very high, let us say, attendance or very good percentage of, let us say, viewership. You can use this to leverage and generate revenues. So, these are some of the recommendations that have been provided in this article regarding how to successfully host Olympics 2036. Done. So, let me go to the next article now. Modi apologizes for collapse of Shivaji statue in Maharashtra. Now, this will not be asked in the preliminary examination nor in the mains examination, do not worry. What caught my attention was one statement, just one statement, that is speaking after, in the second paragraph it says, speaking after laying the foundation stone of 76,000 crore Vadhvan project, Vadhvan Port project. One line is provided for this. Rest of it is opposition parties criticizing government. How much is the height of the statue, what will be the action taken, the committee formation, etc. But please understand, I do not think UPSC will be more focused on the statue, rather focus more on Vadhvan Port. Now, question is, what is the importance of this Vadhvan Port? Understand this carefully. In India, the ports play very important role. What is the importance? According to the latest estimate, around 90% of total volume of trade, around 90% of total volume of trade that India has conducted, and around 70% of value of trade that India has conducted is done through ports itself. I hope you understand my point here. Around 90% of volume and around 70% of value of trade that we conduct with the rest of the world is through ports. And historically speaking, the port infrastructure in case of India has been insufficient. The infrastructure has been not sufficient to basically meet the aspirations of government of India in terms of, let us say, promotion of exports. For example, whenever you talk about exports in India, one of the key features that is holding back the exports, that is having an impact on India's exports, is the cost of logistics. Correct? Cost of logistics. In case of India, the cost of logistics compared to other developed countries is slightly on a higher level. And one of the reasons why cost of logistics is higher in case of India is because of the port infrastructure itself. A lot of times earlier we used to import these raw materials which would go to, let us say, other ports, larger ports, deep sea ports, and from there these were brought into India. And when these are brought into India, again there is a concept of movement mostly through the road infrastructure. And when you transport using mostly the road infrastructure, cost of transportation, the cost of logistics, emissions cost, etc., generally tend to be higher. In order to address this particular issue of logistics, at least in the context of ports, the government of India earlier has launched the initiative of Sagar Mala. It has launched an initiative of Sagar Mala. Under this, the government of India wants to develop, modernize multiple ports which are present in India. And regarding the ports, the third very important point is, the ports are generally divided into two types. We refer to them as major ports. One grouping is called as a major port, second one is non-major port, also referred to as minor ports. Until now, the number of major ports in case of India were 12 in number, 6 on the eastern coast, 6 on the western coast, 12 in number. In the month of June, Government of India, that is the cabinet, cleared setting up of a 13th major port, and that 13th major port, my dear, was basically the Vadhvan Port. Is it okay? The 13th major port that was announced or that was cleared by the cabinet in the month of June was the Vadhvan Port. What is the importance of Vadhvan Port? Listen to me carefully. Point number 1, Vadhvan Port will be developed as the largest port in India. Remember this, it will be developed as the largest port. By far in India, this will become, once developed, the largest port in India. So much so that once it becomes operational, because it is going to be developed in phases, once it becomes operational, it is expected that this will become one of the top 10 ports in the world. It will be considered as one of the top 10 ports in the world. That is the importance. Such a large port we are proposing. And look at the cost of the infrastructure project, 76,000 crore rupees. The cost of infrastructure project is 76,000 crore rupees. And when you spend so much amount of money, don't you think it will also lead to lot of employment generation? Lot of employment generation. According to the speech given by the Prime Minister yesterday, this port is expected to create jobs of 12 lakh number in India. 12 lakh jobs would be generated because of this particular port. Point number 3, this particular port will be developed by reclaiming sea, reclaiming the part of the sea. Hence, the government authorities are saying the problem of land acquisition will not be faced. Problem of land acquisition will not be faced in case of development of Vadhvan Port. Because generally in case of India, one of the issues that the infrastructure projects generally face is the land acquisition. I can give you numerous examples. For example, Silver Line project in Kerala that was shelved by the government because of land acquisition issue. Or for that matter, the bullet train project, which was supposed to be operational by now, but because of multiple factors including land acquisition, is yet to become operational. So, land acquisition has been one of the problems associated with infrastructure development in India. In case of Vadhvan Port, the government says this will not be a problem anymore. And because this is a 13th major port, remember this, this will come under the government, under the regulation, under the supervision of the central government. That is essentially, it will be under the Ministry of Shipping. It will be under Ministry of Shipping. Okay. In fact, the full name of this ministry is Ministry of Shipping, Ports and Waterways. Right. So, these are certain very important points regarding the announcement, or let us say the yesterday's inauguration of the project of Vadhvan. Okay. So, these are important points. Again, if you understand this, the point is very important in the context of infrastructure, the syllabus infrastructure under GS paper 3. Okay. Now, let me go to the next article. Education Ministry tells Tamil Nadu government to sign memorandum of understanding to get Samagra Shiksha funds. What is the issue all about? Understand this carefully. The government of India has announced two very important schemes in case of education. One of the scheme is Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, okay, SSA. And the second one is right, PM Shri. Second one is PM Shri, which was announced very recently in the year 2022. Now, what is the basic point here? What are the points that you need to understand? Both of them, that is a Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan as well as a PM Shri, both of them are centrally sponsored schemes. Both of them are centrally sponsored schemes. Basically, under this, both of them, you will see the distribution of expenditure is a 60:40. That is under Samagra Shiksha also, the center will allocate 60% of the funds, states will have to contribute 40. Same in case of PM Shri. Now, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is an integrated scheme. Integrated in the sense, earlier there was a different schemes. Earlier there were different schemes, they have been merged into one scheme. For example, earlier there was a scheme by the name of teacher education. There was a scheme by the name of teacher education. Please remember, teacher education scheme was there. There was a Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. Okay, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. And the third one is basically the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. So, earlier there were three different schemes and Government of India merged all the three different schemes in 2018 into making one scheme by the name of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. They made one scheme, integrated scheme. Now, for this year, certain funds have been allocated to all the states including Tamil Nadu. Right? Listen to me now, this is the crux of the dispute or friction. This year, just like every year, certain funds have been allocated to the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, the contention between the center and the state is that the Tamil Nadu state government has not yet signed MOU in context of implementation of PM Shri scheme. And Tamil Nadu is not the only state government. Many state governments, the usual suspects, again on a lighter note, the usual suspects, West Bengal, Kerala, Punjab, Delhi, these also have not signed the MOU with the central government to implement PM Shri. And now the central government says, until and unless you sign the MOU to implement PM Shri, I will not allocate the funds for the current financial year under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. And the point is very simple here. Out of thousands of crores of rupees which were supposed to be allocated in this financial year for the state of Tamil Nadu, please remember, under the SSA, the funds are allocated in 4 equal installments. Is it okay? The funds are allocated in 4 equal installments. Have a look at this. Right, basically for 24 and 25, the funds which have been allocated or approved for Tamil Nadu is this amount. Do not memorize this, it is of no use. And out of this, the first installment, because the 4 installments, out of that the first installment was supposed to be done by the central government to the state of Tamil Nadu. So far, the funds have not been released. The first installment funds have not been released. Not released so far. And because the funds are not released, the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister has written a letter to the Prime Minister, and replying to that letter, the Minister, Mr. Pradhan, has given a statement yesterday. The statement is very simple. You sign the MOU to implement PM Shri and we will release the funds. But the criticism, right, again both the sides, the criticism against this is both of the schemes are different. One is PM Shri and the other one is Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. Why should Government of India hold one state, right, basically hold the state like this in terms of implementation of a scheme if they do not agree to sign an agreement or let us say MOU in terms of other scheme? And the point of contention regarding PM Shri is very simple. Under PM Shri, any state that will implement it, it has to abide and implement the provisions under National Education Policy, NEP. They will have to implement the provisions of NEP. And the idea for PM Shri is basically to implement and ensure NEP will be implemented in India. So, these PM Shri schools, will be set up throughout India. More than 15,000 have been proposed under the initiative. The government of India will ensure that these schools will be operated according to the guidelines, according to the provisions till 27, that is for 5 years, and after that it will hand over these schools to the state governments. The state governments or UTs will have to operate and ensure the schools, that is a PM Shri schools, will continue to meet the same standards after the handover is done. And in this particular scheme, they are supposed to implement NEP, and the NEP 2020, the most important crux or the point of contention is the 3-language policy. The 3-language policy which has been proposed under the NEP. And the Tamil Nadu government simply says, we do not accept the 3-language policy. Why? We are following the 2-language policy. The Tamil Nadu government simply says, we are following a 2-language policy. So, we will not accept the 3-language policy, and if I accept the 3-language policy, it might lead to me pushing Sanskrit, right, or let us say as a medium of teaching, as a medium of learning to our students, and we do not want to do that. Historically, we have used Tamil as well as other language as a part of 2-language policy, but the government of India simply says it is not entirely correct. The argument of Tamil Nadu government is not entirely correct. Why? Under the NEP, no doubt we have a 3-language policy, but there also there is a provision. If required, the states can continue to teach in their regional languages or local languages. That provision is there. So, there is no threat of, right, basically moving away from Tamil language to, let us say, Sanskrit language for the purposes of education in the state of Tamil Nadu. So, this has been a point of friction. The state has written a letter to the central government has written letter back to the state government, and at the same point of time there is also a criticism, why should the center hold one state, or let us say basically, right, ask one state or the states to sign up into implementation of another state if they want funding under one scheme. That is not the right way, that is a criticism. That is not the right way to implement this. If the center wants to implement PM Shri, they can always right, negotiate with the states and bring them on the board and ensure that the PM Shri initiative is also implemented. So, these are certain very important points regarding the article given here, right. So, please be very careful. Questions can be asked regarding the initiatives in the prelims as well as the mains examination. So, next assignment to you people, MCQ assignment number 19, consider the following statements regarding PM Shri. It is a central sector scheme. The schools will be developed as a green schools. These will be developed and maintained by the central government till 2047. How many of these statements are correct? Do let me know in the comment section. If not, wait for the next session when I will take it up and I will discuss this. Next article, Supreme Court of India to set up a 5-judge bench to hear Kerala's plea on ceiling on net borrowings. Now, what is the issue? In the last 1 year, there has been a lot of discussion between the friction, that is financial frictions between the state of Kerala as well as the central government. The crux of the matter is very simple. The central government under FRBM law, fiscal responsibility and budget management, and using the provision of Article 293 of Indian Constitution, has imposed certain restrictions on the borrowings that could be done by the state government of Kerala. And I am starting with the presumption that you have attended the earlier lectures where we have discussed concept of a net ceiling borrowing, etc., right. I am starting with that particular presumption. So, understand this, central government has imposed certain restrictions, right, using many of the provisions on the borrowing limit of state governments including Kerala. Now, citing this and saying that it is opposite to fiscal federalism, the Kerala government approached the Supreme Court of India, asked the Supreme Court of India to direct the central government to withdraw such provisions and also give permission to the state government of Kerala to borrow more money from the market to take care of their expenditures. Now, the Supreme Court bench, which consists of 2 judges, they referred this matter to a constitutional bench. They referred this to the constitutional bench and basically posed certain questions which should be taken up by the constitutional bench so that such issues will be resolved. Now, yesterday the Chief Justice of India has announced that he will look into this matter and he will be setting up a 5-judge constitutional bench to look into the matter of dispute between the Kerala government as well as the central government. Now, what are the matters which has been referred by the Supreme Court bench to the constitutional bench? First one, the constitutional bench has to see whether fiscal decentralization was an aspect of India's fiscal federalism, and if the central regulations which will fix borrowing limit on the states, whether these are violating the principles of federalism in India. So, basically it is a constitutional question now. The Supreme Court has to see and rule whether these kind of limits imposed by the center, are they violating the provisions in the constitution regarding fiscal federalism. That is a point number one. The financial restrictions introduced by the central government, whether these are different for different statements, whether through these kind of regulations is the central government favoring some of the states and is against some of the policies, or let us say against some of the states. That also has to be identified. Third one, to examine if the borrowing restrictions of the center were in conflict with one of the functions of the central bank, that is the Reserve Bank of India, which acts as the public debt manager for the center as well as the states. Is it basically violating this function of Reserve Bank of India? Because please understand, RBI performs a function, a duty as a public debt manager for the central government and all the states which have signed agreement with the RBI. Now, if central government will impose restrictions on the borrowings of the states, obviously it will basically have an impact on the performance of this duty of RBI. So, now that also has to be seen by the constitutional bench. And finally, whether it was mandatory for the center to have prior consultations with the states whenever the recommendations of the Finance Commission are to be implemented. So, these are the matters which have been recommended or which have been referred by the bench of Supreme Court of India to the constitutional bench, which will be taken up by 5-judge bench. Okay. Now, next article, Brazil Supreme Court freezes Starlink assets. Very interesting article, by the way. What has happened? Couple of days ago, Mr. Elon Musk, who is the owner of, right, let us say X as well as the owner of the Starlink here, announced that they would be closing operations, X operations in Brazil. Although the services will continue to be provided, they will be closing the operations in Brazil. And in the tweet, or let us say the statement that was given by him, he basically stated the reason for this is the rulings of the Supreme Court there. The kind of censorship that the country is following does not allow X to operate freely, basically promote freedom of speech in the country of Brazil. Now, what is the issue all about? What is actually happening there? Listen to me carefully. Couple of years ago, there were riots which happened in Brazil. And during the riots as well as after the riots, there was a lot of dissemination of misinformation through Twitter, which is called X now. And when Supreme Court of India started looking at all of this, the Supreme Court there sent an order to the company X to take down some of the tweets and to take down some of the channels. Is it okay? They sent an order, Supreme Court issued an order saying that these particular tweets are misinformation, this is wrong information being provided to people, this can further create problems, right, regarding safety and security. So, take down these channels, please take down these particular tweets as well. Now, regarding this order, the company X, right, basically gave a reply saying that they are not going to comply with any of these orders. They will not comply with any of these orders issued by the Supreme Court. And after this, again there was one more order from Supreme Court which asked, who is your legal representative in the Brazil, give the information to me. There is a particular judge, right, who has been at the crosshairs of Mr. Elon Musk here, do not worry about the names. So, argument is the judge issued one more order asking who is your legal representative in Brazil, Give me the name, give me the details. Why? We will start imposing penalties. And even after that, if you do not follow these orders, we will imprison your representative. And that is the precise reason why X announced that they will be closing, because of this kind of a dictatorship or censorship followed by the Supreme Court. They will be closing all their operations in Brazil. And after that, one more order has been issued now by the Supreme Court judge, wherein they have basically put a hold, put a freeze on all of these Starlink accounts which are present in Brazil. All the bank accounts which are present for Starlink in Brazil, the finances have been frozen now. And the issue here is, they are saying because you are not following the orders, the Supreme Court is saying because you are not following the orders, we will penalize you, we will freeze your accounts, we will ensure that your operations will be disrupted now. And against this, again the company X has given a statement saying that how is it fair to penalize one company against orders issued of another company? That is, Starlink is another entity, X is another entity. You have issued an order against X, you want to penalize X, but now you have frozen the accounts of Starlink. In what way is it fair, etc., etc. So basically that is actually happening in the country of Brazil regarding the misinformation, etc., etc. And I hope you understand the correlation between this article as well as the article that we discussed yesterday regarding the arrest of the Telegram CEO by French authorities. Again, the idea is same, free speech versus dereliction of duty. Don't you think you will have to manage what is posted on your app? You will have to have certain checks and balances to keep the fringe elements out, which will cause a lot of disturbance in the society. Okay. Now, next article, senior ICAR scientist hired laterally without any reservation. Again, in addition to the reservation, lateral entry, concept of lateral entry in civil services, there is one more article which I am pretty sure will create lot of ripples now. It is not just in case of civil services, now it has been found that even in a premier research organization such as ICAR, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, even in this organization from the year 2007, post the year 2007, more than 2,700 scientists, or let us say the personnel at higher levels, especially at higher levels, have been appointed through lateral entry. And this has happened since 2007. So, point number 1 is simple, post 2007 or since 2007, people at higher level, especially at much higher positions, have been hired through lateral entry. And what is the concern here? The concern raised by association of representatives, or basically the association formed by these scientists, say that this has actually led to having impact on the efficiency of the organization. That is, there is basically a toxic work culture that has been created because of this practice. Because their argument is, if I want to become a part of ICAR, which is a very premium organization by the way, was set up much before, in case of India, even before independence, 1920s, as an organization to promote, let us say, research and development agriculture sector. So, this organization, one way it will hire people through lateral entry, that is interview and bring them on board. Second way, if I want to become a scientist in ICAR, first I will have to write a written examination, I will have to clear the written examination, I will have to give interview, etc., etc. There is a 3-stage process for this, just like civil services. There is a 3-stage process, and when I finish all the 3 stages successfully, I become part of ICAR. I will put in 20 years of service, 25 years of service, but when it is the question of promoting me to the position of research management as well as senior research management or senior level positions, the authority hires through lateral entry. Authority goes and hires through lateral entry, and it is not just 1 or 2 positions, more than 2,700 positions since 2007. More than 2,700 positions have been hired through lateral entry itself. Even right now, out of the total workforce of 6,304 people, out of the total workforce of 6,300 plus people, right, understand the data here, 1,884 positions have been hired through lateral entry itself. Remaining 4,400 people, they have basically gone through the 3-step process, they become part of ICAR, and these 1,800 plus people have been hired through lateral entry, which is unfair. Point number 1, which is unfair on the part of these people who will work hard, put in lot of services, higher year of services, but they will not be able to move beyond a certain level within the organization. Point number 2, by hiring more and more people through lateral entry, the concern which has been raised is it not violating the principles of reservation? Correct? Are they not violating, right, the affirmative action? Through affirmative action, they wanted to undo or basically address the issues which have been happened against certain communities historically. But by going for, right, let us say lateral entry, they are not following the principles of reservation, as well as they are violating many of the court judgments as well. So these are certain important points regarding lateral entry even within, right, the ICAR. I am pretty sure this will create lot of ripples in the coming days. There will be lot of discussion regarding this in the coming days as well. Okay. Now next article, fertilizers are a source of many ailments, switch to organic farming. A statement given by the Minister of Cooperation, Mr. Amit Shah. What are the important points here? Point number 1, Government of India has been promoting agriculture production through organic farming itself. I will give you a couple of examples. The Government of India earlier has launched an initiative by the name of PM Pranam. Under the PM Pranam, the whole objective is to reduce consumption of chemical fertilizers. The Government of India wants to reduce consumption of chemical fertilizers. They want farmers to consume more and more, right, let us say organic fertilizers, and they want to reduce the consumption of chemical fertilizers. Through this, basically that is the PM Pranam initiative, the government will be incentivizing those particular states which will push consumption of organic fertilizer and reduce the consumption of chemical fertilizer. This is one initiative. Is there any other initiative? Pradhan Mantri Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. And this is one more initiative. Many of the states are implementing multiple components which are there under the PM PKVY, Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, wherein again natural farming is one of the areas, one of the pillars under this initiative of PM KVY, right? That is another very important initiative. Third very important initiative, if you just think of this, Government of India has established, that is the Ministry of Cooperation has established one more entity by the name of NCOL, right? Please remember this, NCOL, that is a National Cooperative Organics Limited. The third initiative is establishing NCOL. It has been established under Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act of 2002 by the Government of India, Ministry of Cooperation. Basically, NCOL will perform the functions such as certification or promotion of organic food products or organic agriculture commodities in the domestic market as well as the international market, etc., etc. So these are certain important points which have been which you need to understand in the context of government promoting consumption of organic products in India. Historically, if you see, the demand was lesser because the knowledge amongst the people, that is the consumers as well as the farmers was also lesser. But in the coming years or in the last couple of years, there has been a rising demand for organic commodities or organic products in India. And the Minister of Cooperation says it is the right way to go. There will be a further demand in the coming decades for organic products. So we need to promote, consume more and more organic products, because if you keep on consuming, let's say, the other normal agriculture commodities, there will be fertilizer content in that, chemicals will be there, and your health will be affected because of these chemicals. So, this is in a nutshell what is given in this article regarding fertilizers being the source of basically chemicals. Last article for the day, very small article. LGBTQIA plus couples can open joint bank accounts. A new rule has been issued by central government now. Now, the ruling dates back to basically the last year judgment of Supreme Court of India. Last year Supreme Court of India looked at whether legal recognition can be provided to same sex couples, and the Supreme Court of India, based on certain arguments, basically said no, we cannot recognize same sex marriage. Is it okay? The Supreme Court of India issued a judgment that refused to recognize same sex marriages. However, the Supreme Court ordered central government of India that can we implement certain policies, certain measures which will basically enable these kind of couples, that is the couple who will belong to LGBTQIA plus category. And again, it is not a category like a caste category and nothing of that sort. Okay. So, can we ensure certain policies are implemented, certain measures are undertaken which will enable the couple who belong to this group. And following this, the central government this year has announced a new ruling which says, or new order has been issued which says, if you are LGBTQIA plus, then you can open joint accounts. Right, then you can simply go for opening of the joint accounts. Earlier, certain banks had not allowed this. That is the reason now, first very important point, the government says they can go for joint accounts. This is point number 1. And point number 2, whenever you open a bank account, there is a feature of nomination. There is a feature nomination. What is the importance of this? Imagine, okay, just imagine this. If I open a bank account, if something happens to me, who will receive all the money that is there in the bank account? Right, although some of you will be very happy, sir, right, if something happens to you, you will not take Hindu News Analysis, somebody else will take, our favorite teacher will take now. Don't worry about it. So, come back to the discussion here. If something happens to me, then who will get these funds within the bank account? That is the process of nomination. And again, facility of nomination is not just limited to bank accounts. In almost all the financial products, there is always a concept of nomination. So, argument here is, what about the nomination? Now, Government of India says even the same sex couples who are part of these the grouping as such, they can go for nomination of each other. That is, let us say there is a gay couple. Let us imagine there is a gay couple. So, one person can nominate the other person, if they have a bank account. Same applicable to lesbians, etc., etc. So, even the nomination facility will be allowed for the people belonging to this. So, these are the two very important points regarding which the order has been issued by Government of India, which basically means now the banks will have to follow the order, and this order earlier RBI had also clarified regarding this. Many banks were following this, but now this will become official because of the order of Government of India. Done? So, these are certain important points regarding the article provided here. So, these are the various important articles that I believe are relevant for both examination, that is prelims as well as mains examination. I have tried to cover from different areas, from economics, from S&T, from social issues, etc., so that this analysis will be a one-stop solution for all of your current affairs requirements. And if you like these initiatives, do hit the like button and do not forget to hit the subscription button if you are yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's it from my side. See you again next time. Take care. Have a great day.